Hi, students from Canada and Japan. I'm Scott Carlson. I'm a writer for the Chronicle of Higher Education in the United States. I've been asked to offer some thoughts about where education is going in this sort of COVID-racked world right now. And I also wanted to spend some time talking about the connection between college and the work world, about pursuing your passions, what's sometimes called your hidden intellectualism, and whether that's still possible in a world where our economy has been sort of torn up by the pandemic, and what's going to happen with the labor market anyway? Aren't machines coming to take our jobs? These are just some of the things that I'm going to talk about over the next half an hour. Um, but a couple of things before I get into that. What I wanted to tell you, offer a caveat up front, was that I know the educational system of the United States better than anything else. And so I'm sorry, what I'm saying here is going to apply to the United States. It's not necessarily going to apply to Canada or Japan, but hopefully you'll still get something out of it. I think there are still a lot of commonalities. The other thing I wanted to say is that I had a hard time doing this video just by staring at this little green light here on my computer. And I wanted to make sure that what I was saying was sort of relevant to a younger generation. So I tried to go at this from a different perspective, and I brought in Ethan, who's a student that I met at Trinity College in late 2019. And he's going through this process right now of trying to figure out what his passion is and how to pursue it under the current pressures. The reason why I wanted to bring in Ethan is that, we're facing a ton of challenges right now. I'm almost 50 years old. I'm sort of in the second half of my life and I have things sort of figured out. But, Ethan, how old are you?
I'm currently 20.
And Ethan and I met when I did a lecture in 2019. It was about a little over a year ago at Trinity College, where Ethan's a student. And Ethan, can you tell people a little bit about the kind of conversation that we had? I was there to talk about the future of work and about how to design your life for future careers. We had no idea the pandemic was coming at that time, even though it was only, 3 months away, 4 months away from the
Yeah, I
start.
believe it was 4 months away. But yeah, you can certainly do that. So at the time, I was taking a how to design your life course, and I was going through a weird sort of a little internal battle between going towards my passion versus going towards a career. So all throughout high school, I had told myself that I was going down a engineering path, and I had an interest in it, but I had to sort of make a choice between what really made me tick and what my passion and drive was for versus just a stereotypical, oh, this is a one-way career path that's gonna get me a lot of money later on post graduation in college.
Yeah. So I think what I want to talk about, and the reason why I wanted to bring you in for this conversation, was that you are pursuing your hidden intellectualism. You're pursuing the thing that you want to do over what may have been the safe bet, right? You thought that engineering was sort of the safe bet, and then you thought, oh, videography is really what I want to do. All right. So why was I interested in talking about pursuing passions or the future of work in college? Well, first of all, I pursued life as a writer, following a passion or a talent that I had, even though family members didn't want me to do this. So I try to put out as much encouragement as I can when I'm talking to students at colleges about, the future of work and what's happening in college and how you pursue a sort of a life after college. I do this across the country all the time. Second, finding a passion in life is kind of the hook that leads someone down the road toward great things, whether it's a great career or a fulfilling life or a sense of purpose. And so many young people, when they enter college, because of the structures in our educational system, are sort of undecided when they enter college what they want to be or what they want to do. They don't know what their talents are. They don't know what they want to do with the education. And even worse for some students that I've met, they're in their last years of college, their second to last year or their last year, and they've decided that what they've been pursuing over the past 3 to 4 years is not really what they want to do. The other side of this, the other reason why I'm sort of pursuing this is sort of COVID related. I feel that the pandemic is going to put pressure on young people to pursue more practical pathways in life, maybe in a way that they don't want to. Already, the main reason families say that they're sending a kid to college is for the job outcome. And that's been pronounced since the recession in the United States. And it's been even more pronounced since college has become the pathway to good jobs. Its signaling function has become really strong. So some colleges or some economists will tell you that the wage premium associated with a college degree has doubled over the past 50 years. What that means is that the amount of money that you get paid over and above someone who has just a high school degree, that amount of money has doubled. And it's doubled not because college graduates get paid so much more than they used to, but because people who have only high school degrees get paid so much less than they used to. Essentially, we're using the college degree as a pay-to-play filter on the job market. And some, including myself, would argue that this is a socioeconomic filter. Who graduates from college more often in the US? Students who are white and students who are affluent. So if you're an employer and you put a requirement on your job application that the applicant has to have a college degree, no matter if that job requires a college degree or not, practically, yes, you're going to bring in more people who maybe have more drive and more talent, and maybe that's your rationale. But you're also going to bring in people who come from sort of a higher socioeconomic status, and maybe that's sort of the stealth reason why you're putting that on the requirement. To add to all of these problems, colleges have not really historically done a good job of connecting students to jobs after college. And the pressure to change this, like I said earlier, became intense after the recession when people were graduating, young students were graduating from college, and they weren't finding jobs after college just because there weren't any jobs out there. But many colleges and parents and students even, they approach this whole process problematically in the sense that they sort of unthinkingly equate major with job. So you're a nursing major, you're going to become a nurse. You're an engineering major, you're going to become some kind of engineer. And for the ambiguous majors like history or studio arts, it's not really clear to parents and students what kind of employment that leads to. I mean, what the pundits are saying is that, majoring in history, majoring in philosophy, majoring in studio arts can lead to anything. But if you're a 22-year-old, anything really means nothing if you have nobody guiding you onto the path to career or passion after that. So you have to think about these factors when the cost of college is increasing dramatically faster than the cost of most other products and services. And I think after the pandemic, these kinds of factors are going to put more pressure on students to pick something practical. What have been some of the responses of sort of the traditional educators that when you've said, I don't think I want to do engineering, I think I want to do videography, I think I want to do photography? And you switched majors, correct?
Yeah, I did switch majors.
And so what was the reaction from people?
From my grandparents, I know it was very negative at first. My aunt and my direct family are a little bit more supportive, just because I feel like for older generations it's really sought after, and it's really hard to go against. It's almost going against the grain towards going towards a passion or something like that.
Mhm.
But from education wise, I think at Trinity College they do a really good job at being open and supporting of different hobbies and passions. I think right now my struggle is actually I'm trying to double major, so I'm trying to do studio arts with a economics major, just because just in case I have some midlife crisis and I want to change to a financial accounting job or something like that. I want to have the ability and the skills to do that. And coming out of college with just studio arts isn't going to give me the ability to if an emergency happens, or if I flip flop, because I still I keep Excel sheets of all my spending. I created a budget, and I'm trying to also on the YouTube channel I'm trying to sort of integrate financial education, because that's another thing that I guess is another passion and hobby, I guess, that I don't really consider.
Mhm.
But I study credit cards. I'm trying to figure out how to go into real estate, and that's I'm trying to mix the two between the videography, photography.
So that's a great example of sort of the direction of where I think careers are going, which is, careers are headed in sort of this what they're looking for is sort of what they call a T-shaped professional, right? So it's a person who has, a long depth in some area, but is able to talk across these different disciplines and different sort of interests, and able to sort of tie the principles of that deep thing that you know very well across to these various other things. That's one of the key things. The other key thing I think that's happening in the work world, which is this sort of combination between soft skills and artistic skills and hard skills and sort of technical skills, and mashing those two together. The people who have, those two kinds of facets to their personality, to their skill set, those people are just absolutely employable and will do really well in life, I think. So the pandemic is definitely going to pressure colleges to figure out how to connect what they do to what students want to do. And the American higher education system was already under pressure prior to COVID. The cost of higher education, first of all, has been going up steadily, even as family wealth has evaporated. The last recession led to a birth dearth that is going to depress student numbers into the mid 2020s. What that means is that there's sort of a demographic slide that's happening in significant parts of the country. And these happen to be the parts of the United States where there are the most small private colleges. That's the Northeast, sort of the Rust Belt through the Midwest, Ohio, Michigan, and so on, and up into the upper Midwest, the Dakotas, Minnesota, and what have you. For a lot of these colleges, they've been reliant on enrollment income. And this has been terrible for them in some ways as these numbers of students, eligible students, has declined. But the pandemic has just accelerated this even more. So many colleges, particularly small, underendowed residential institutions, rely on these room and board fees to float the boat. And if students aren't coming to campus to stay in the dorms and eat the food, a number of these institutions, whether they're regional public colleges or small private colleges, are just bleeding money. That's in part because they have a tremendous amount of debt and a high amount of deferred maintenance, a lot of it connected to building and a lot of it connected to residential building. And colleges just haven't been really closely financially managed over the decades traditionally. They don't know the costs of the programs that they're offering, and they've let a lot of academic programs just sort of continue on and proliferate, and they've been reluctant to cut them even when they're under enrolled. I think the pandemic is leading colleges to chop academic programs under financial duress. You see that all across the country right now. My fear is that many colleges will end up chopping these open-ended humanities and liberal arts programs precisely because it's not clear, again, it's not clear to educators, administrators, faculty, parents, students, how you connect these majors, these disciplines to the real world applications and jobs. In the meantime, what's going to be preserved, I think, and what's going to be emphasized among parents and students and among the colleges themselves are going to be these disciplines like nursing and healthcare, science and technology jobs that have a clear, if sometimes unimaginative, connection to work. Overall, I think the push to go online with the financial problems and the closures among small colleges, I think the outcome in higher education, in the higher education space, will be clear. The big and the rich will get bigger and richer, and drawing more students, going more online, going for more rote pathways to careers. And the small and the experimental schools that value exploration, that value the liberal arts, will be diminished or even pushed out of existence. So this kind of class system that we see in higher education at some level is in many ways reflecting the kind of class system that we have in the United States right now, where sort of the richest folks are pulling away from the rest of us. And the threat is that we're going to head into sort of an hourglass shaped workforce where with the introduction of artificial intelligence and mechanization, we're going to have a bunch of people at the top who have these soft skills. They're able to talk to people. They do jobs that are not able to be automated. And then we have a whole middle class, sort of middle skills section where their jobs have been sort of replaced by robots. They've been automated. And these used to be sort of really well-paying jobs. In the middle, a lot of them come out of manufacturing and so on. And then we're going to have sort of a bunch of people at the bottom where it's essentially too expensive to build a robot to replace what they do. Or we're having a situation where we have what Michelle Weiss called on a podcast with me yesterday, sort of so-so automation. And that's so-so automation would be, you're in the Amazon warehouse, we have a robot picker that's able to pick the products off of the shelves, but it doesn't have the sophistication to put them in boxes. And so we have people sort of the last of the line taking these various objects and putting them in boxes for $12 an hour or whatever the wage is. It's not really livable. And the companies sort of just keep cranking up the pressure on that. So this is sort of a really, I'll bet to you, it feels like a very dangerous world to enter into after college. Is that right?
Definitely a bit, because you don't know how you're really going to stand out and like where you're actually going to be able to go. Especially like internships is like what you really have to focus on, or like developing a mix of both soft and hard skills.
I think one of the big challenges for a lot of younger people today is figuring out what your hidden intellectualism is, because it just hasn't been encouraged by the school systems leading up to college in the first place. I mean, think about the high school that you went to. Were there robust programs for the arts, for music, for things that weren't necessarily practical? Or did you feel like when you were in high school, it was sort of a drill and kill, here's the next thing you have to sort of absorb and then regurgitate?
Yeah, my school definitely, like, they had some arts and some like films, but there's definitely not as much of a robust and just like a push towards taking these classes. And I definitely was trying to really go down the engineering path at the time. So I was just doing go, everything engineering, math based. I was swallowing all the information I could and just regurgitating it back and just figuring out what I learned along the way. And it's sort of like I sort of like swayed away from my sort of passion as photography and videography, because like I was always juggling, trying to figure out like how much of my passion do I put in, how much do I put into engineering. And that's sort of like when we actually spoke at the time, I sort of was figuring out like, okay, engineering is something I'm interested in, but it takes up way too much time for me to even have time to focus on my passion. So it's like, what else could I get into play where I can sort of balance the right amount of passion and the right amount of like just hard skills, I believe it would be called, of like just mathematics and things like that. So it's kind of like the balance and the blend between it, because like it was my passion was almost like maybe 10% of what I was doing instead of more so like a 50-50 balance.
Okay, so much of the K-12 system in the United States is now about this race toward college. And I think that's at the expense of personal growth and about finding out what your talents and interests are. For one thing, the race toward college discourages exploration and failure. Students who think of themselves as college bound are encouraged to take courses and engage in activities that impress admissions officers. First of all, that does discourage oddball interests, and oddball interests that might be difficult to sort of package for a college application. But more than that, it discourages people from exploring topics and activities that they might not be good at, because that might affect your ability to enter a coveted school. And as I've pointed out earlier, the stakes associated with school and career outcomes in the minds of a lot of Americans is really powerful. This is all despite the fact that we know that failure can be one of the best learning experiences that young people can have. The other learning experience that young people can have, and which is also being diminished, is working at a job. But what's interesting is that because there's so much pressure among some populations to perform well in high school so that you can get into a college, so that you can go work in the career you want, the percentage of high school students that work during high school has dropped over time. It was somewhere in the 70% range in the 1970s. It's now around the 30% range today. And that's happening in part because employers are not hiring teenagers in quite the way that they used to. But it's also happening because parents are saying to their kids, don't go work that job, don't go work at the pizza place or at Target or at Walmart or wherever. Concentrate on school and get good grades there so you can get into college. Again, This despite the fact that we know that even menial jobs can be great learning experiences, and they can instruct you in all kinds of soft skills that you're going to need later in life. And they can even point you toward talents and interests you never know you had. And part of the problem is that employers are not supporting young people to learn the job in quite the ways that they were in the past. That training function that a lot of employers have had in the past, in past decades, for past generations, has just been sort of it's been de-emphasized and defunded at these employers. What they want is for students to come out of college ready to work and ready to perform. The problem is that no one comes out of college ready to work and ready to perform at quite the level that these employers expect. And so the employers are disappointed with colleges for not providing the employees that they want, and at the same time unwilling to sort of train them, give them the level of support and training that they would have in the past.
I would definitely agree on that, because it's not like you're getting the actual experiences. You're coming out of college with sort of like a written educational knowledge, but there's no experience there. And it's sort of like, it's the experiences that are really like where you learn the most. It's the hands-on. That's how you learn. And a lot of times employers, it's so easy to fall into, okay, we expect them to already have had experience in this or that, but we spent 4 years at a university focusing on a mathematics major, but we didn't work on actually looking and analyzing the financial spreadsheets of a business and how they're actually managing it.
Yeah,
Managing finances for that is much different than just doing mathematics.
that's correct. I mean, a lot of academic work like that is disconnected from the real world. I mean, one of the most interesting stories I did for the Chronicle some years ago was about the Sustainable Cities Initiative at the University of Oregon, where students were encouraged to take these classes that would allow them to work within these cities in their various disciplines. So basically what the University of Oregon did was they took a bunch of different courses across the university, and then they would partner with a city and tell the city, hey, we have all of these students who want to do real world practical work in your city. Just give us a chunk of money, and that'll support the kinds of reports that are going to come off of the practical work that these students are doing in design classes, in journalism classes, in urban studies classes, sociology courses, and so on, studying poverty in the city, studying the design of the streets, studying the signage, and so on. And you would talk to the students who work on these programs, and they would say, this is the most fulfilling work I've ever done in any educational situation I've had, whether that's K-12 or college. And often what these students were encountering were situations where there were these practical hurdles that no one would have thought of in the academic environment. For example, there was one student that I talked to who was designing signs for the city of Springfield, which was the neighboring city to Eugene. And she designed the signs and then brought them out to show the city managers, and the city managers said, these signs they're great looking, really unusual design. How would we attach them to the pole that goes into the ground that, sits on the corner of the street? And the student said to me, that was the first time anyone had ever asked me a practical question related to the work that I do here in college, related to my passion. Okay, so the connection between the real world and college is one of my passions, one of my areas of interest. But the part of it that I'm really interested in is practical skills. And I'm going to send you an article to go along with this that explains a little bit more of my ideas around this. But we think of ourselves as living in this very technological society, in this very design-oriented society. But in fact, we live in a world where old technology is all around us. And the skills for how to use that old technology, which has a ton of practical uses and can really offer young people freedom in their personal lives, and intellectual assets for the professional world, that really has been de-emphasized by the educational system. What has been pushed out of the K-12 system up to now has been the kind of practical skills of old: carpentry, cooking, sewing, these things that I took in vocational classes when I was in middle school, many, many years ago. Those skills were pushed out of the education system. They started getting pushed out of the American education system in the late 1970s and early 1980s as we started to move toward this system of pushing everyone toward sort of an academic pathway. That's been a huge mistake, I think, because, what do you do every day with your life? You're cooking, you're sewing. Look at the COVID situation, like the number of people who had to sew masks and it broke out the sewing machine for the first time. In my own case, I think about I renovated a house and now I'm going to buy another one and renovate that one. A lot of this stuff was self-taught for me. I wished it was in the school system, but it's not. And so, are emphasizing these skills that are a little bit distant from our everyday lives, um, emphasizing these skills that are valued by employers but are not useful to us in the everyday sense, I think has been a big problem for United States education. It's also served to sort of further divide us by class. Class and race is one of the major reasons why these skills have been pushed out of the education system in the United States. Prior to the 1980s, we had an informal tracking system here. And under that tracking system, students were picked out for the academic pathway in some cases. And in other cases, students were encouraged to pursue vocational learning and blue collar jobs. And formal versions of this kind of tracking still exist in places like Germany and Switzerland. The problem with the American version was that it was skewed by race and class. Students who were non-white were more often encouraged to pursue non-academic pathways. And at the same time, in the early 1980s, the United States government was getting nervous about other countries like Germany and Japan, which are making huge gains in math and science. So given the race problems associated with this, given the fact that they wanted people to pursue higher level degrees, they decided to trash this vocational system, this tracking system altogether, and replace it with a college for all policy. In my opinion, that's been a big mistake in some ways because, clearly college isn't right for everyone. More than a third of students who start college in the United States don't finish at least in the time that we track them. And again, this has exacerbated the class problem. We've spent decades tacitly denigrating whole career pathways for people that are A, legitimate, and B, decently paying. I remember going to Washington State some years ago, talking to students and educators about at high schools where they were trying to bring back more of this vocational kind of training. The research around this was encouraging. Students who do vocational studies in high school generally did better in high school with their grades, and they matriculated in college at higher rates. But what did parents say to all of this? They said those were dirty jobs and they weren't glorious. I want my kid to go to college. It's from years of sort of pushing those kinds of jobs down. And you have to see what the impact of that has been socially. I mean, even in the political imagination of the United States, look at the crowd outside the Capitol during the insurrection. Carhartt jackets, hunting gear, rural working class identities. Who are their targets? Liberal, college educated, quote unquote, elitists. This is where we've ended up by splitting the country in this way, denigrating certain kinds of jobs and elevating certain other kinds of pathways. In a practical systems thinking approach sense, this serves to divide us as well. I mean, you think about the challenges that we face with climate change, with water shortages, with soil erosion, pollution and destruction of big agriculture, enormous infrastructural challenges, suburban sprawl, poor urban planning. These sorts of practical hands-on skills can give you an opportunity to have connections with people who are actually working in these areas, working out these problems, and they can give you more of a perspective on how to solve these problems. So if you're a student who's majoring in, let's say, environmental science at a college, and your plan is to go and look at soil erosion, look at climate change, look at water use, you're going to be talking to people who are farmers, people who work in rural areas. How do you advise uh, policymakers? How do you advise farmers if you don't know what a carrot looks like when it's coming out of the ground? How do you think about infrastructure? How do you think about housing? How do you think about suburban sprawl if you don't really know the basics of, how a house is built, what a wall is made of, what it looks like. I think these sorts of skills have been de-emphasized in our, sort of effort to sort of bring everyone up to sort of an academic kind of life, and a white collar sort of pathway. So, Ethan, we're going to get out of the pandemic hopefully very soon. What do you think your life is going to look like after that? How do you think you're going to approach your life following
I
this?
think I'm definitely going to really embrace and enjoy like all the little things and enjoy like the ability to just walk into a store without a mask is something like after the last 6 months, it's almost seems like it's never going to be a thing again. And
And
sort of
how
just like the little things. Yeah.
and how do you think you're going to approach your career? How do you feel about, the world that you're going to enter into, professionally?
I think I definitely want to make sure it's something that I really am enjoying every little part of. It's same thing like the breathing and walking into a store without a mask. It's literally the little things and those little like mundane, the daily tasks. If I'm not enjoying those, that's gonna just make it a lot harder and being able to really enjoy and prepare for what's coming next.
Are you concerned about sort of the world that you're walking into professionally? Do you think that it's going to be much more difficult than it was for, say, your parents? Or are you, I mean, given that we're having sort of a historic moment here, a historic breakdown, economically in this country at some level, are you concerned that your future looks a little more dim than it would have maybe when I met you?
Yes and no. I think definitely part of it is there's a lot of doors that have been closed and a lot of opportunities that would have been there that may have been shut down or people that like it was hard to really sustain. But now there's also new doors and new opportunities that are going to be opening as well. And I feel like it's always a never ending process of sort of like some doors are definitely closing at times, but other doors are always opening. And it's similar to how the entire like workforce and is it's really all changing and it's sort of going towards the topic of hidden intellectualisms or passions per se.
Yeah. I mean, I think the future is going to hold a number of challenges. Um, but I think that if we're able to wrap our heads around changing some of these aspects about the education system, if we are able to, look more at practical education, if we're able to encourage students more to look for their own passions, their own quote unquote hidden intellectualism, if we're able to transform schools really sort of into talent engines, finding where the talents are in students and exploiting those. I mean, there's an old sort of principle when it comes to management, which is, you have Bob, Mary, and Jim. Bob is good at talking to people, but he's not necessarily on top of all the details when it comes to doing his job, but he's really charismatic. He knows how to make the sale, and he's great at that. You've got Mary. Mary's very detail oriented. She crosses every T and dots every I, and she knows how to get the job done. She's not very social, and doesn't work well with customers. Anything customer facing, she's not good at that. And then you've got Jim, and Jim is super creative, sort of out in space, comes up with the best ideas, um, does okay when he talks to the customers, and is sort of okay on the details. What does the school system do with each of those people? Tries to bring them all up to sort of the same level. They have to sort of operate on this same level, across all the different talents. I think school systems ought to be pushing more toward, hey, let's identify Bob's talents, identify Mary's talents, let's identify Jim's talents and exploit those, really press those and push those and help them with the other parts of it. Um, that would be more of the kind of humane school system that we kind of need for the future. And I think that's probably where we should be heading.
I would definitely agree on that. Definitely a positive sort of route to go on.
Well, Ethan, it's been great talking to you, and I hope we offered some sort of insight or enlightenment for some of the students.
Yes, I would agree on that. It was a pleasure.
Thanks, Ethan.
Thank you.